Hello, true believers. This is Doc Hogg, and welcome to episode 60 of Comics and Variety. If you like this channel, please do subscribe, hit the notification bell to be notified when I post new videos, and for the sake of YouTube's search algorithm, please do hit the like button. Let's see, what's wrong here? Oh yeah, that's a bit more accurate. A few weeks ago, I was suspended from Twitter, and I've written a piece about it for the Federalist, which I will provide a link to in the description below. I'm going to summarize that here and add to it. The person at issue here is Magdalene Mags Visaggio, who used to be named Brian before she underwent sex reassignment surgery. I tweeted about her because I was planning on reviewing her comic book Vagrant Queen for my YouTube channel. It is being made into a TV show by the Sci-Fi Channel, and given how terrible the comic book is, I figured it was well worth making a video questioning why it is being made into a TV show. But that resulted in a Twitter suspension, and here is the email from Twitter, which includes the two offending tweets. As you can see, Twitter wasn't specific about which of their speech guidelines I had violated. But digging into Twitter's hateful conduct policy, there is this. Quote, "We prohibit targeting individuals with repeated slurs, tropes, or other content that intends to dehumanize, degrade, or reinforce negative or harmful stereotypes about a protected category. This includes targeted misgendering or dead naming of transgender individuals." So that's presumably what I was guilty of. So, if you don't know, let me explain what misgendering and dead naming are. Misgendering entails referring to a person, usually a transgender person, with a pronoun or other word that does not reflect the gender with which that person identifies. Dead naming means referring to a transgender person by his or her birth name instead of his or her chosen name. In this case, since Mags Visaggio is a transsexual woman, referring to her as he, or as a man, that would be misgendering. Referring to Mags as Brian that would be dead naming. But you'll notice that I really didn't do that. What I actually said in the tweets were, in the first one, I wonder if she, formerly he, thinks things would have worked out as well if she lived in a socialist system. And in the second one, I said, have you subscribed to my YouTube channel, Comics and Variety? Coming this week, why is Sci-Fi making Vagrant Queen by Mags, nay, Brian, Visaggio into a TV show? For any of you who don't know what nay, N-E-E, actually means, here's a definition. Well, I appealed my suspension because saying a transsexual woman used to be a man and saying that she used to be called by a man's name isn't misgendering or dead naming. And after about 4 days, Twitter agreed and removed my suspension. But as I talk about in my piece in the Federalist, suppose I had referred to Visaggio as he or him with no qualifier. Should that really be a violation of Twitter's rules? On the one hand, Visaggio has had cosmetic surgery to look more like a woman, but on the other, every cell in Visaggio's body still has the male XY chromosome pair. Thus, it is at least debatable whether Visaggio should be called a man or a woman, although Twitter assumes the issue has been settled. That said, I really don't think it is wrong, either in a biological sense or in a moral sense, to call someone who is transsexual to refer to them by their original gender.
Remain exactly where you are.
What?
Make no move until you are ordered.
Ah! Oh, crap!
How many fingers am I holding up? 5. You see at least that it is possible.
Okay, now that I've been cured of my wrong think, let me move on to a slightly different but very much related issue. What about someone like Jonathan Yaniv, who wants to be called Jessica? If you're unaware, Yaniv is a transgender activist in Canada, but he is not a female in any meaningful sense. He still has his male genitalia. But if you refer to him as he or as Jonathan on Twitter, you can and probably will be suspended. It has happened. And so Twitter's rules apply not just to transsexuals like Visaggio, but for anyone who decides that they are a different gender other than the one they were born as, even if they haven't had a sex change. And ultimately, Twitter has decided that it is going to reinforce the principle that an individual's gender is not determined by biology, but by an individual's choice. Now, Twitter is probably pushing this principle because they want transgender people to feel welcome on their platform. They want to avoid harassment of transgender people on Twitter. Okay, fine, good. The problem is that a principle like this takes on a life of its own, regardless of what people intend. As Thomas Sowell, the great economist Thomas Sowell likes to say, once you open the floodgates, you can't tell the water where to go. And it's often going to go into places where you really don't want it to. If a man decides he is a woman and demands to be called a woman, it is a small step to wanting to be treated like a woman in other ways. Twitter and others backing this principle, I suspect, never intended for boys to, say, compete in girls' sports. But of course, we are seeing that now. And of course, such boys win most of the events. The girls now compete for third or fourth place, really making a mockery of the competition. And in some cases, like mixed martial arts, it can have very serious consequences. Read up on Fallon Fox, on the name Fallon Fox about that. I'll provide a link in the description below.
Again, from the Federalist. Jonathan Yaniv, for example, expects estheticians to provide him a Brazilian wax, which is hair removal around one's naked genitals. After numerous beauty salons declined, Yaniv filed complaints with the British Columbia Human Rights Tribunal. The tribunal, of course, is taking Yaniv's complaints seriously, stating, waxing can be critical gender-affirming care for transgender women. But it did note the issue is a little sticky. At the same time, it is a very intimate service that is sometimes performed by women who are themselves vulnerable. If the tribunal rules in Yaniv's favor, beauty salons in British Columbia will have to force estheticians to either touch men's members or close shop. Whether Yaniv is really trying to strike a blow against the patriarchy or wants to satisfy other desires is debatable. He has been accused of the sexual harassment of minors and trying to share child pornography, and he was recently arrested for possessing a taser, which is illegal in Canada.
So women who just wanted to make a career out of working in beauty salons and only ever expected to be working on other women, now are going to get swept up in this. Even people who have, never harassed someone like Yaniv in their lives. They may be forced to do something that they view as disgusting, and you can bet there are going to be plenty of men out there who are going to try to take advantage of that. And otherwise, they're going to be out of a job. And while we're on this subject, that principle also results in men wanting to use the women's bathroom, which empowers sexual predators. Now, I know the response to this, and that is very few, if any, transgendered people are sexual predators. They are not going to use the women's bathroom to prey on women. And I'll gladly concede that because it misses the point. It's not genuinely transgender people who will abuse it. It is the sexual predator who now has a way of getting himself out of trouble with the law. A man gets caught in the woman's bathroom, and he can now tell the police, well, I'm transgender. That's what I was doing here. And then what do? You actually have to catch him in the act of actually abusing women before you can do anything about it. If our society, or at least a large enough part of our society, embraces the principle that gender is determined by individual choice and not by biology, it is going to have costs, and we really need to debate whether it is worth paying those costs. We should be having a vibrant debate about that. Not acting as though, like Twitter does, that the debate is settled.
And one last time for my piece in the Federalist. Yet such debate is difficult, if not impossible, on Twitter, in part because Twitter relies heavily on users to report speech code violations. This enables extremists to weaponize Twitter's speech codes. In a debate over the idea that sex is determined by an individual's choice, proponents of that principle will inevitably use Twitter's prohibition on misgendering and dead naming against opponents. And you can't discuss something on Twitter if your account is suspended.
You know, think about it. How do you suppose that my account received a suspension? Was it Mags Visaggio who reported my tweets? I initially doubted it. I mean, I didn't even think that she knew who I was. However, she blocked me after Twitter removed my suspension. So, you know, maybe. It also could have been plenty of other SJWs that I've tangled with in recent months. And that's the point. Folks who are extreme leftists will use the speech codes, the hateful conduct policy to stymie debate. And obviously you can't discuss and debate something on Twitter if your account is suspended.
Alrighty, that music means that it is time for Hogg's Headlines, all the news that Doc Hogg wants to report on. Dateline, Kickstarter, aka Wokestarter. On Wednesday, someone who goes by the Twitter handle Abacus Mike, aka Mike Miller, sent out this tweet noting that Kickstarter had not approved his project. Here is the email that he received from Kickstarter. It says that they're unable to approve his project because Kickstarter does not allow discrimination, subjugation, or intolerance towards marginalized groups. And what is it that Mike had in his project, which, by the way, was a comic book that was so bad? Well, these pages here. Apparently, Kickstarter has a problem with portraying the Central American gang MS-13, which is a pretty violent gang, portraying them as an actual violent gang. Apparently now that is racism. As Mike noted in his tweet, apparently Kickstarter considers MS-13 a marginalized group. Yeah, only in the sense that they marginalize an awful lot of people. It's kind of hard to know what to say here. I mean, this is ridiculous. It's MS-13, for God's sakes. Doesn't anybody at Kickstarter read the news? So what is acceptable to Kickstarter now? Well, Jeremy at the Quartering put it best.
Where a comic book hero runs up against a gang and a fight ensues. A tale as old as time. Now, if these characters were bikers, we know, based on how Kickstarter is enforcing these rules, that they wouldn't have a problem with it.
I guess the advice to all comic book creators, if you want to use Kickstarter, well, first the advice is don't use it. Use Indiegogo instead. But if you're going to use Kickstarter, make sure that your villains are limited to this or this. Actually, there's quite a bit more to this story, but I'm going to leave it here for now. I'll provide links to the Quartering video, also to videos by Ethan Van Sciver and John Malin about this subject. At any rate, that's all for now. Until next time, have a very nice day.
How many fingers am I holding up? 5. You see at least that it is possible.